This video is brought to you by BetterHelp. What's up, guys? Michael here to talk about the website that has irreparably damaged every nook and cranny of my fragile brain. Twitter. And while we're on the topic of things that are objectively bad for me that I can't look away from, let's also talk about Elon Musk. Because along with solving the energy crisis, building colonies on Mars, and naming a baby X, he has decided to use some of his fortune to purchase the aforementioned hell site www.twitter.com. Now, it's not uncommon for rich people to buy outrageous things. So naturally, the internet responded to this purchase in a totally rational way. No, just kidding. They just lost their minds. And enough Twitter users straight up deleted their accounts in protest, such that some folks were wondering if Elon had already started to wield his powers to drain their followers. Others retreated to Instagram, a part of Meta which is owned by this guy. So were people right to freak out about Musk's Twitter bid? Can he use the platform for some type of evil, or is the internet always in need of its main antagonist and Musk just happens to fit the bill? And should we not be using products owned by dudes who might be bad? Does any of this really matter? Let's find out in this Wisecrack edition. Will Elon ruin Twitter? And a quick note before we get into it, buying one of the major tech platforms isn't like buying a new couch. Transactions on this scale involve board members and stocks and lawyers and lots of money, which all take lots of time. So at the time of this recording, Elon Musk does not officially own Twitter, and the deal could still fall through. And if it does, merely consider this a thought experiment. But before we dive in, we want to thank BetterHelp, who's sponsoring this video in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month. That's right. May is a month dedicated to raising awareness, providing support, and fighting the stigma against mental health struggles. This year's theme is Together for Mental Health, which encourages people to share personal stories and hopes of making everyone feel empowered to prioritize their mental health. So here, I'll go first. I grew up in a family that wasn't really open about mental health and emotions, so it wasn't until much later in life that I was able to reach out to a therapist, and once I did, I realized that I'd been depressed for a lot of years. But finally being in therapy and opening up and having someone tell me that what I was feeling was okay and that there was ways to approach this was really a life-changing situation. So I, for one, wouldn't be where I am today without therapy, and I really encourage anyone who's feeling that type of way to seek it out for themselves. Now, another goal of Mental Health Awareness Month is to improve access to mental health services, which has been one of BetterHelp's goals from the start. Regardless of your location, this customized therapy platform allows you to communicate with your therapist through your choice of video, phone, and/or live chat sessions. So if you're not in the mood to be on video, no problem. Plus, BetterHelp offers unlimited messaging, so you can contact your therapist anytime and as often as you like. Because BetterHelp's network has over 20,000 therapists from a variety of backgrounds, it's easy to find one whose expertise suits your unique needs. But it's easy and free to change therapists if you don't hit it off. Once you sign up for BetterHelp and fill out a detailed questionnaire, you can start communicating with your therapist within 48 hours. It's not a crisis line and it's not self-help. It's professional therapy done confidentially and securely online. Plus, it's more affordable than traditional in-person therapy. HSA benefits are accepted, and financial aid is available. So if you're struggling with your mental health, try BetterHelp today. Or if someone you know is really going through it, try suggesting BetterHelp to them. Visit betterhelp.com/wisecrack to join the over 2 million people already taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. And when you go to betterhelp.com/wisecrack, you'll get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/wisecrack. And now, back to the show. Now, before we figure out if the Musk buys Twitter outrage is warranted, we need to take a brief detour through the analog era. Because while old-timey rich men didn't know the difference between a Dogecoin and a Benefer, they did know the power of owning the means of cultural and journalistic production. For more on this, see the quaint indie film Citizen Kane. Dudes like William Randolph Hearst, the inspiration for Citizen Kane, used the newspapers they owned to push their own agenda. This allowed them to do things like garner national support for a war, Hearst was partial to the Spanish-American variety, or simply to seek revenge against their industry rivals. For the ultra-rich of the early 20th century, owning a newspaper was basically like having a personal megaphone. Eventually, feeling like their voices still weren't quite loud enough, the Hearst of the world began acquiring entire chains of newspapers to further propagate their beliefs. But in the post-World War II era, things like journalistic integrity and editorial independence became trendy, and the idea of a rich old dude that lived in a castle owning all the newspapers started to seem a bit gauche. And American journalism lived happily ever after, right? Right, it did? It lived happily ever after? Yeah, not really. To say nothing about the fleecing of American newsrooms, pivots to video, and the push from news to content in the past decades, we are once again living through an era of super rich people owning media outlets. And also, an era of really good TV shows about super rich dudes owning media outlets.
Why shouldn't we do all the news?
Why shouldn't we do all the news? Well, Kim Jong pop, because that's not how things work in this country.
Speaking of television's favorite father figure, the real-life inspiration for Logan Roy is none other than Rupert Murdoch, whose company News Corp heads up hundreds of news and media outlets around the world, including your Uncle Rod's favorite channel, Fox News. And much like his on-screen counterpart, Murdoch has been accused of various misdeeds, from hacking the phones of journalists and celebrities to straight up using his media empire to manipulate the national political discourse. And Murdoch isn't alone. The ex-husband of noted philanthropist Mackenzie Scott,
CEO entrepreneur, born in 1964.
Jeffrey Bezos, threw down $250 million to acquire the Washington Post in 2013. Bezos' billionaire frenemy, Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff, snatched up ownership of Time magazine in 2018. And the Emerson Collective, an organization run by widow of Steve Jobs, Lauren Powell Jobs, snagged a major stake in The Atlantic. Meanwhile, the LA Times, San Diego Union Tribune, and a number of smaller community papers were purchased by biotech billionaire Patrick Soon-Shiong for $500 million.
I don't believe you. The liberal media would have told me about this.
There's no such thing. The New York Times is owned by NYT Incorporated, which is owned by Altheon Ballistic Dynamics, which is owned by the Murdoch family, who are owned by Halliburton.
So as you can see, Musk's bid for Twitter is far from the first time that a rich one percenter purchased a media company. Maybe for the purpose of directing media narratives or making sure people can't say mean things about them. And to put my cards on the table, the only truly mean thing I have to say about Elon Musk is that men who get hair transplants are sellouts, and there is no room for self-hating bald men in my circle. Now, you might be thinking, Elon isn't like the other billionaire boys because he's not buying a newspaper or cable news network to reinforce his own ideological agenda. He's just purchasing a demented global town hall where he'll sit back and let everyone express whatever views they want, 280 characters at a time. And while we get where you're coming from, in another sense, the fact that Musk isn't simply buying a paper or media network makes things even more extreme. That's because he's not just buying a media source. He's buying the place where a majority of news media and information is posted and distributed. In other words, he might not be buying a newspaper, but he's purchasing the proverbial digital printing press and distribution networks used by every news and media company, along with basically every writer and journalist on the planet. And in doing so, he's going beyond the trend of members of the ruling class owning media companies as pet projects. And to understand what this means, we need to talk about something called platform capitalism. To understand what it is, let's start with the first part, platforms. While they are sometimes places you can stand while you wait to catch a train to a magical school of wizardry, these days, platforms usually refer to apps and websites like Uber, Airbnb, and Facebook. As the book Platform Revolution puts it, a platform is a business based on enabling value-creating interactions between external producers and consumers, providing an open, participative infrastructure for these interactions and setting governance conditions for them. Or as theorist and academic Nick Siernick puts it, what are platforms? At the most general level, platforms are digital infrastructures that enable two or more groups to interact. They therefore position themselves as intermediaries that bring together different users, customers, advertisers, service providers, producers, suppliers, and even physical objects. And unlike, say, a newspaper, which is a physical product that can be sold for profit, platforms don't really create anything of value, at least not in the traditional sense. According to Siernick, by providing a digital space for others to interact in, platforms position themselves so as to extract data from natural processes, weather conditions, crop cycles, etc., from production processes, assembly lines, continuous flow manufacturing, etc., and from other businesses and users, web tracking, usage data, etc. They are an extractive apparatus for data. So while old school billionaires might have used their media companies to push their own views and agendas onto media consumers, new school billionaires like Musk Musk use platforms like Twitter to extract data from those of us who use these platforms. In this way, we can see Musk's acquisition of Twitter as evidence of what writer and professor Jill Lepore refers to as Muskism, or extreme capitalism. As Lepore sees it, a childhood of reading and, according to a recent video on this channel, misreading science fiction has led Musk to favor a sort of capitalism which is more theoretical than industrial. As she describes it, I think it is an extreme form of capitalism in the sense that it's plutocratic. It's something old again. There's a lot of feudalism in Muskism. It's like there are these lords, and the rest of us are the peasantry, and our fates are in their hands because they know best. And the idea that Musk's brand of capitalism is sending us back towards feudalism caught on quickly after he announced his purchase of Twitter, with people expressing concern that, with Musk in charge, every time we tweet, we'll actually be doing free labor on Musk's digital land. But Cernak questions the argument that posting is equivalent to doing unpaid labor. He says that free labor is only a portion of the multitude of data sources that a company like Google relies upon. Economic transactions, information collected by sensors in the Internet of Things, corporate and government data, such as credit records and financial records, and public and private surveillance, such as the cars used to build up Google Maps. So even when we're not actively posting, if that's something you're capable of, we're still creating data simply by existing or being alive in our largely digital economy. We're creating data basically all the time. Cernak goes on to further disconnect posting from traditional labor. Beyond the intuitive hesitation to think that messaging friends is labor, any idea of socially necessary labor time, the implicit standard against which production processes are set, is lacking. This means there are no competitive pressures for getting users to do more, even if there are pressures to get them to do more online. While a feudal laborer couldn't really choose to not work their land, we can choose to put our phones away and not post. So the good news seems to be that when you tweet at your favorite director giving them your notes on their latest release, you're not technically doing free labor for Musk. The bad news is that no one is forcing you to tweet other than yourself. But labor or not, he's collecting a ton of your data. Like, that you're watching this video right now in your house. But let's get back to the negative reactions to Musk's Twitter acquisition. Much of the anger seemed to be based on the idea that people enjoy using Twitter, but they don't enjoy the person of Elon Musk, and thus, Musk's acquisition of Twitter means they will now enjoy it less. Sort of like if some dude who bullied you in high school bought your favorite sandwich shop, and now every time you bite into that turkey pesto sub, you can almost taste the toilet water he used to dunk your head in. For others, it seems that they worry that Musk will somehow impose his personal political views, whatever they are, onto the platform in some way. And this isn't an unfounded worry, as according to Cernak, platforms are also designed in a way that makes them attractive to its varied users. While often presenting themselves as empty spaces for others to interact on, they in fact embody a politics. The rules of product and service development, as well as marketplace interactions, are set by the platform owner. Though, as of the writing of this script, the main changes he's discussed are charging brands and larger accounts for quote tweets, potentially monetizing viral tweets, as well as the addition of an edit button. But for many, it simply seems to be the case that Elon Musk owning a popular platform is crossing some type of moral boundary. But that worry also seems to imply that up until now, Twitter was owned by the good guys. And who are those good guys? Well, until Musk takes over, the majority shareholders of Twitter are Morgan Stanley Investment Management, the BlackRock Group, Vanguard Funds, and some Saudi investors. None of these dudes have ever been accused of being too woke. And BlackRock was at one point the world's largest investor in coal plant developers and is currently one of the world's largest investors in weapons manufacturing. I mean, say what you will about Elon, but at least the dude is more into batteries than coal, and rockets that go into space more than rockets that accidentally hit hospitals full of civilians. So what makes Elon Musk any better or worse than those companies? Or for that matter, the owners of Meta, Google, Amazon, or any number of prominent digital platforms? Some of the outcry seems to come from a genuine desire for a version of what we could call ethical capitalism or ethical consumerism, where our money, and in the case of Twitter, our time and attention, is spent supporting brands and companies that share our values. This mentality has been on the rise in recent years and is particularly prominent amongst millennials. There are even financial funds that specialize in investing money in companies deemed to be adequately ethical and/or environmentally friendly. This attitude looks like someone who won't eat at Chick-fil-A because their owners have a history of funding anti-LGBTQ organizations, but who will eat at Chipotle because of their commitment to sourcing sustainable and organic ingredients. But just like you can't bang your way to virginity, some would argue that you can't capitalism your way to an ethical society. It seems like the phrase, "there is no ethical consumption under capitalism," is becoming a crucial proverb for our times. The idea here is that if we apply the standards of individual ethics and morality to capitalism, which functions according to economic and not moral logic, we'll be consistently let down. Much like the recent controversy around Joe Rogan's deal with Spotify, which similarly led users to proclaim that they were leaving for other digital streaming platforms, we see these contradictions when people want brands to share their ethics and politics. And it's not hard to see the contradictions at play when companies attempt to convince consumers that they are, in fact, doing ethical stuff. For example, recently Blue Bottle Coffee started piloting a shift to make oat milk their default milk, for the purposes of reducing greenhouse gas emissions that come from dairy production. Which seems great, until you realize that Blue Bottle is owned by the Nestle Corporation, who, along with being a generally very, very bad company, they literally did child slavery, also has a full-on dairy division. So even if you feel good about your oat milk latte, you're also giving money to a company that was sued for, and I cannot repeat this enough, doing child slavery.
It's not handmade in USA. It's pronounced handmade in USA. The Han people are a Vietnamese slave tribe, and USA is their island prison. They made your jeans. You know how they get the stitching so small? Orphan.
On the other hand, there are those who might say it's unethical to eat things like fast food due to things like food quality, environmental impact, and labor conditions. And that it's bad to eat factory farmed and non-organic meat and produce, again, for environmental impact and working conditions. But what does that mean for people who can't afford organic grass-fed chicken breast or gluten-free cashew mac and cheese? Are they to be held morally responsible for their consumer choices? Or are they simply doing whatever they need to do to survive in a system that isn't providing a lot of other options? If you can afford to patronize companies that treat the planet and workers well, that's great. But if you can't, you shouldn't be held morally responsible for systemic issues that you have no control over. Which brings us back to the question of whether or not Elon Musk is going to ruin Twitter, and if leaving the platform is a useful response for folks who don't dig Elon's whole libertarian space pirate who is also an online psychopharmacologist vibe. So, if people decide to leave Twitter, where will they go? If you're able to simply abstract yourself from social media altogether, we have nothing but the deepest love and respect for you. But for those who are dependent, either socially or professionally, on social media platforms, where might you go if the worst guest host in the history of SNL succeeds in buying Twitter? Maybe you head over to Instagram or Facebook. Well, they're both owned by Meta, which is the brainchild of this guy, and if you find him to be a significantly better person than Musk, there you go. But maybe you're not into Zuck's misinformation-happy platform either, so you're gonna park your digital self firmly on TikTok. Oops, well, they're owned by Chinese company ByteDance, which has been accused of censoring and surveilling content on behalf of the Chinese government, which is not the best. So maybe you go with the platform not connected to global corporations and find some new friends on Craigslist Missed Connections. What are you trying to do? Get yourself killed? The point is, it's pretty hard to fully disconnect ourselves from companies that vary from kinda sketchy to literally doing human rights abuses, because platforms of all types have become inextricable from modern life. So unless you want to go fully off the grid, you're gonna have to navigate some type of relationship to platforms owned by people with names like Mark, Jeffrey, and yes, even Elon. And we're not saying it's good that Musk is buying Twitter, but we are saying that moral categories like good and bad aren't the most useful metrics to apply to platforms whose sole purpose is the extraction of data for the sake of profit. Asking a platform to be moral is like asking a couch cushion to be delicious. Musk's reign as CEO of Twitter might be bad, it might be good, it will almost definitely be weird. But one thing we do know for sure is that he isn't the only super rich person who sees value in owning a platform whose sole purpose is the collection of monetizable data. And as more of our social and professional lives get inextricably linked with these platforms, we're all kind of stuck here, whether or not we continue sharing our flaming hot takes on Twitter every time we drink too much caffeine. But what do you all think? Is Elon going to destroy the peaceful Twitter community we've come to know and love? Or is the reaction to his recent bid overblown? Let us know in the comments. Hit that subscribe button like you're launching your high school bully into deep space on a SpaceX rocket, And don't forget to ring that bell. Thanks to our patrons for all your support, and be sure to check out our new Patreon perks. And as always, thanks for watching. Later.